Good afternoon. I'm here on the snowy afternoon with my guest, Belle Brett. How are you, Belle?
I'm well, thank you, Doug.
Thank you for coming out today. She's the author of this new novel, Gina and the Floating World. And I'll read an introduction to Belle, to what she about. Belle Brett is a graduate of Grub Street's intensive Novel Incubator program. After a career in education as a teacher, career counselor, and evaluator of educational programs, she is now an artist and writer, contributing to her own and others' blogs and writing fiction that deals with the coming of age across the lifespan. She holds a doctorate of education in human development and psychology from Harvard University. A lifelong traveler in her 20s, Belle served as a bar hostess in a working-class Tokyo suburb after a 6-month trip across Asia. She now lives with her photographer husband in Somerville, Mass. Gina and the Floating World is her first novel. So just tell me the conceit, the premise of the novel, just for our authors.
Okay, so the novel is about a young, a naive but ambitious Midwesterner who goes to Tokyo for a banking internship so that she can get into a prestigious MBA program. Mm-hmm. And she finds out very soon that the internship is unpaid. So she lands through a contact she makes, a job as a bar hostess in this seedy club outside of Tokyo. And there she finds it's a challenging job, and there she meets a man who takes her under his wing, an older, wealthier man, and really heads down a darker road, shall we say, after she gets to know him. But she also learns a lot about the culture and gets exposed to the arts and some of the finer parts of life in Japan. So I consider it's a coming of age, kind of fish out of water story.
Now, I know you spent time in Japan as a young woman. Is this loosely based on your experiences?
Okay, I'd say loosely is the word. It's inspired by my experiences, and in fact, I actually recently wrote a blog post about what was true and what wasn't in it, but I'll tell you just a few things.
Because in essence, the girl was a sort of call girl. I mean, you know.
Yes, she becomes, that's right, she essentially takes money for sex, ultimately. But I was a bar hostess, as my bio that you gave suggests, and that's what I did. That's as far as it went, and I always had to make that very clear to people.
It was a stretch. You stretched
yes,
it.
But I did have that experience of being in that world, which is a world that the tourists don't generally see, particularly women, and particularly at that time.
Okay.
So I set the novel in 1981. Which was a little after the period I was there, but I wanted it to be around the time I was there so that what I remembered about it was authentic.
Okay.
So.
Now, let's be honest, you have many graphic sex scenes
Yes.
in thing. I mean, how hard is it to write about sex? I don't know if I could.
You know, Doug, it's an interesting question. A lot of people ask me that. I didn't find it very difficult. Once I let my imagination go, the only thing I was worried about was afterwards when I'd written it and I knew people would be reading it who'd known me when I was very young and might have had different ideas about who I was. But it was fun. I think I just, you go with a sensory detail, you just get into the moment of it, but it's something that a lot of people find very difficult. And for some reason I wasn't. The impetus for writing that, the original first draft wasn't very sexy, but I went to a workshop in Tucson in 2006, and it was called Writing the Marketable Novel. And the person who was running the workshop loved the premise, but he said, you gotta ramp it up. You gotta ramp up the drama and you gotta ramp up the sex. So that was my assignment, and I went home and I took it seriously.
So do you think that, it's, the sex is peppered with Zen and philosophy and things like that? I mean, it seems to be, it's more than just, if there were some critics who say it was just basically, you threw in some Zen and then there was sex or something like that. How would you answer that?
Well, I tried to, I think there's an arc to the
Yeah.
sexual scenes.
Yeah.
They start out kind of innocent and sweet and then a little quirky and then really erotic, I hope, sensual and erotic, and then they get weird. And as she delves deeper into her own experiences taking money for sex, as basically, or a prostitute, so they become bizarre in the end. So that was really the arc I was going for more than it. The scenes, her mentor, Mr. Tambuki, is the one who really pulls her into this life.
He couches everything with this,
Yes.
Buddhist stuff. But
That's right.
just in the end, he seems like a callow, just guy who wants to get, as we say. I mean, is that a wrong interpretation?
Well, I want the reader to figure out. Some people tell me they love him. He's their favorite character. Other people, who is he? What's, he's basically.
Are you sympathetic to him?
Am I sympathetic to him? I think he's. That's an interesting question in this day and age of Me Too. Obviously, this is a man with more power and status and money.
Plus he's married.
He's married. He's taken this young woman under his wing and gradually led her into this world. So I think he's abused his position. So to that degree, I'm not sympathetic. I think he's offered her some good things. Do they outweigh where he's taken her? Again, without giving away too much of the farm so people read the book. I think that she's on an important journey for herself, and she learns a lot about herself. It's really a book of self-discovery, and some of that really is very much due to her interactions with him.
Okay.
And what he's introduced her to.
Okay. What I was going to say is the character, for instance, the main character, Gina, she changed it from Dorothy or something like that.
That's right. She gets named Gina by her first boss because the name Dorothy is just going to be too hard for the Japanese to pronounce. So he wants something a little crisper.
Well, if the character was your daughter and she told you her experience, what do you think your reaction would be? I know you've never been a mother, but.
Well, if she was my daughter, I'm guessing she probably wouldn't tell me her experience unless we had a very cool, chummy relationship.
Assuming you did.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd be pretty horrified as a parent.
Okay.
That my daughter had done this, that both, I think, from the point of view of being taken advantage of, and also that she had made the decision, because I think in the end she really wasn't forced into doing this, having this lifestyle. She chose it.
She chose it, so that would be horrifying, isn't it?
Yes. How did I raise a daughter to make this kind of choice for herself?
But I was going to ask, did you model this on any other? I mean, we all have influences and things of that nature. I mean, is there any author that you've modeled? I mean, this kind of novel on?
Not really. One of the things you have.
I mean, I think Jacqueline Suzanne had some. I mean, and people. I think she had some great. The Valley of the Dolls was a good one. I mean, did you ever read any of her stuff?
Which I confess I have not read her stuff, and it might be interesting for me to go back and look at. I mean, one of the things authors have to do is come up with what they call comp books that are like theirs that are very recent, and I had a hard time doing that. I mean, they're older books, and they're books that had certainly an influence on me, like Memoirs of a Geisha. It's a quieter book in some ways, but the journey that young woman takes as she's becoming a geisha and her relationship with a mentor have some similarities, and that's a book I admired.
Okay. I was going to ask you, do you like your character, your main Gina? I mean, you have a great sympathy for her?
I do.
Yeah.
I do. I think she's somebody who feels she's been very neglected by her parents. We learned fairly early on that her older brother, and he was a lot older than her, had died when she was about 5, and her parents really never got over that. And they showed their grief. Really, her father became an alcoholic, and her mother was kind of harsh with her, but also they just didn't pay a lot of attention to her. And she was always trying to get their attention. She was good at school, and she couldn't seem to do anything to get them to notice who she was. So I'm very sympathetic with that kind of person who has an upbringing where they really don't feel loved. And she was seeking that.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons she ended up with a relationship with Mr. Tambuki. He was sort of a father figure in some weird way, even though they were sexually involved.
Now, with the millennial generation today, the Me Too movement and things of that nature, how do you think this, or you probably experienced, how does it play with them? Have you had much feedback?
I haven't. I've had some feedback from readers from the millennial generation, not people I've known. They've often been people I haven't known, and sometimes that's more interesting because they don't have any context in which to read it in relation to me. But they've liked it. I think I don't think they see her necessarily as a weak character. She's somebody that. She becomes, in a way, a stronger character, even as she's pursuing these sexual relationships, and she gains some strength through that and some understanding of herself, and in the end makes.
In a way,
makes
she
decision.
could have used the male characters for her own knowledge. I mean, to gain.
That's
I mean,
right.
you could look at it that way.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was, but you haven't got any, negative reaction by the Me Too generation.
No, and in many ways, I mean, I'm part of the Me Too generation too. I mean, women in my generation, we were really came of age during what was called a second wave of feminism, and. I was an avid feminist as a young woman in my early 20s. I worked at MIT my first year out of college, and it was this male bastion.
But if you were a second-degree feminist, a second-wave feminist, but you were a bar hostess, how did that?
Oh, that's actually kind of at the crux of it. I was at the height of my feminist period when I took this job. And for people who haven't read the book or don't know about this, it's in this setting, customers get drunk, and they're very crude when they're drunk, and pretty unpleasant. I think I did what her friend in the novel tells her to do, is I kind of just treated it like play acting. I was playing a role, and this was my job, and it was just so interesting as it was repugnant at the same time. And I just, somehow I was able to do it. But I think it's because I just felt like I was wearing a different hat.
You
I knew it
didn't feel
wasn't forever.
betraying yourself as a feminist.
No, I didn't. Interestingly.
Why?
I think I knew I was there for a short amount of time. I felt like it was such an interesting other alternative window into this culture that I was finding fascinating. And I thought it was an opportunity that I probably wouldn't get again.
So you were actually like kind of a researcher. You viewed yourself as sort of a researcher?
I think I probably did. It's probably the way I justified it. And
did you enjoy it?
I found it very difficult some nights, and other times I enjoyed it. I had some customers that come in. There's one character in there, a customer who
Elvis?
The baby Elvis, although he didn't. In my novel here, he impersonates Elvis. He didn't, but we did speak French to each other, and he was lovely. And I probably had a bit of a crush on him too. And there were people like him who didn't treat me badly, who just were very kind, and we were able to carry on some kind of a conversation, and it was very nice. And there was the bar hostess there, Berta, who I will read an excerpt about. Who was this brassy, loud, older Canadian
with the daughter,
woman
right?
With a daughter, who did take me under her wing, and I kind of liked. I thought the environment was just very interesting, and as I said, it wasn't like I was there for years, which I don't think I could have tolerated.
But you were an adventurous young woman, obviously.
I was adventurous. I had just taken this very long trip to Asia, across Asia, a lot of it by myself. And I truthfully didn't think about the dangers at the time. When I came home afterwards, I thought, oh my God. And people say, oh, you're so brave to have done that. And I hadn't thought of myself as being brave. But in retrospect, looking back, I took a lot of chances.
And what were your parents' reaction?
Actually, very interesting. I was a little older than my character in here. I was actually 26. And I think that experience, that whole trip, I think that was the thing I did in my life my father was most proud of me for.
Really?
I think he had done some traveling when he was young. My parents were British, and they came over when I was young. I was born in England. And my father had been exposed to the U.S. first as a fellow when he was about in his late 20s and had traveled across the U.S. So he kind of, that was in his blood. My mother liked it too. And she had been very adventurous for her generation. So she was probably more worried than he was at the time, but they thought it was a good thing. Good. They were proud of me.
A lot wouldn't. A lot would be very hesitant. That's interesting.
Yeah. My parents were cool that way.
Now, you went to the Grub Street. You told me how important that was, and actually I interviewed many years ago.
Yeah.
Michelle Hoover was one of your teachers.
Yes,
Tell me about the Grub Street experience.
So I first...
By the way, give say hello to Mr. Castellani for me.
I will, yes, who has a book launch tonight at Porter Square Books. It's his fourth novel, and he's the artistic director there at Grub Street.
Yep.
I first discovered, I knew about Grub Street, but I first went in 2006, and it was not long after I had been in this program at Tucson where the man had told me to ramp up the sex and the drama. So I started taking a lot of courses there. And just different aspects, including some called a Novel in Progress. And then I was invited to participate in a year-long Novel Incubator program, which was brand new at the time. And we had to come with a completed draft of a novel. I came with a different one from this, but it was a game changer for me. Michelle Hoover, Lisa Borders were my teachers. We had 10 of us. We were just workshopping the entire novel twice during the course of the year, and learning just a vast amount about writing. So when I finished the class, and I worked some more in the other novel, but I came back to this one, which was already in draft 5 or 6 by then. And I had thought it was pretty good, but I realized it needed a lot of work. So that's what I did. I used everything I learned in that program. I highly recommend Grub Street. It's just excellent teachers there and wonderful students.
So we have about a little over 10 minutes for you to read some excerpts from your novel. And
I'd love to.
So lay it on us.
I'd love to. All right. Well, the first scene I'd like to read for you, and I will wear my glasses for that. I'll just give you a brief setup. So Dorothy, now called Gina by her boss, Chief, this is her first night on the job. And Chief has driven her to the place where she's going to be working. And the job she's gotten through a woman named Suki, whose name comes up, so I want to mention that. After about a half hour's drive, we arrived in Waukesha and pulled up in front of a wooden house with no signs to indicate it was a club or any other kind of establishment. We entered an unlocked door and climbed a narrow staircase to a large room. An empty floor covered in straw mats, like at Suki's, and a closet lining one wall were its only features. Chief opened the sliding doors of the closet. Hanging on one side were half a dozen of the most hideous frocks I'd ever seen, with garish colors, frills, sequins, and gathers in strange places. They looked like costumes from a failed Broadway musical about prostitutes. From this assortment, he retrieved a simple yellow brocade shift and held it against me. Other than the color, which I was certain would make my skin appear jaundiced, the dress was the least offensive of the lot. He then opened the other side of the closet to reveal the bedding and left me alone to change. The shift fit too snugly and rode up my thighs. My navy blue pumps looked all wrong with the dress, but they were all I had. I slinked downstairs. The main room of the club was dark. It held an odd assortment of furnishings, a faded blue sofa, a booth with cracked plastic cushions, and 2 Formica tables with mismatched chairs. The low pile, charcoal gray carpet worn in spots bunched up around the furniture legs. An old jukebox stood in one corner, and a scratched metal Coca-Cola sign served as the only wall decoration. A mirrored disco ball hung down from the ceiling, serving no purpose since the lighting was too poor to allow it to flash. The room reeked of stale smoke and beer. As I was surveying this sorry scene, Chief appeared. He gave me the once-over. "Ah, Gina, I need you to wash some glasses. Customers will be here soon." I followed him into the kitchen, where the main room had merely been dowdy and in bad taste. The kitchen, a narrow galley behind the main room, was a hellhole. The stench of forgotten leftovers made me gag. Dirty dishes crusted with remnants of meals overflowed the sink. Chicken bones, wrappers, lemon rinds, and empty bottles dotted the limited counter space. An overturned beer bottle had leaked its contents down the side of the cupboards, leaving a sticky trail in its wake. I located a soiled, stiff cloth peeking out from under a saucepan on the stove. A large black roach popped out, and I leapt back, hitting the counter and knocking a teetering glass to the linoleum floor, where it smashed into pieces. Chief rushed in. "What's the matter?" he snapped. I pointed to the shards and apologized. He handed me a broom. "Be more careful," he said, seeming oblivious to the kitchen ecology, which could not be disturbed without upsetting its delicate balance. I heard the front door open. "Chief, I have arrived," boomed a loud, brassy female voice with an American accent. "You can rest easy now." Chief snatched the broom from me and shooed me into the main room. There stood a tall, fleshy woman with a head of curly platinum blonde hair and a cigarette dangling from her bright pink lips. She was dressed in a long green flowing chiffon top with matching loose-fitting satin trousers. "Aren't you a cutie?" she said when she noticed me. "I'm Berta, the reliable." Then she shouted, "Got that, Chief?" She blew a big smoke ring in his direction and returned her attention to me. "Hi, I'm Gina. I'm Gina," I said. I'd almost blown my cover. "It's nice to meet you. I assume you're one of the hostesses?" "Bet your ass. Numero uno. They love me more than those other chicks. I got something they can hang on to." She grabbed her substantial rear end and wiggled. "And at least I show up," she added again loudly. From the kitchen, Chief yelled, "Pipe down, Berta. You'll scare Gina." "You new at this?" she asked. She took a large drag from her cigarette, tapped the long ash in the nearest ashtray just as it was about to fall, and stubbed out the butt. "Kind of," I said. "I've done a little waitressing." "This ain't waitressing, honey. This is sucking up to a bunch of horny dudes who'd love to get into your little guy jean panties." If I was on the runway after the scene in the kitchen, I was ready to take flight now. "Oh, don't mind me, honey." Her voice softened. "I just had a difficult day. You'll be fine. Just watch me. I've been doing this for years." Wow, I thought. I'd shoot myself if I had to be in a place like this for long. So the other scene I want to read takes...
You got about 4 odd minutes.
Okay,
yeah.
super. The other scene I want to read takes place, she's been at this establishment for a while. She's moved over actually to the one that Chief's wife runs called The Snack. And she is settled into the job in a way. When I went to the work at the Snack that evening, I chose a third dress from my meager selection. It was a long floral print, not exactly me, but not exactly preposterous. As I cleaned up a beer spill behind the karaoke machine, the door chime jangled. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a man overdressed in a gray suit enter the Snack. I stood up, clutching the wet ball of cloth. With his back to me, he positioned himself on a stool, owning it, yet seeming out of place. Mama-san took rare leave of her perch to greet him. "Gina, Gina," she sang out, her voice cracking, and beckoned me to come over. The man turned around. It was Mr. Tambuki from my first night at the club. Much to my surprise, my heart skipped a beat. Soiled cloth still in one hand, I smoothed my skirt with the other and approached him. He stood up. "Gina, we meet again. You're looking lovelier than before." I bowed slightly. "Arigato, Mr. Tambuki," I said in Japanese. Mama-san smiled and took her leave. "You remembered me," he said. "I'm flattered. And you've learned some Japanese?" I decided to play it cool, but I could feel the muscles in my stomach tense. Yes, a little. What can I get for you? I went behind the bar and dumped my cloth. Start me with a bottle of whiskey, he said. He sat down. Get yourself a drink, too, a real drink. He winked at me. I thanked him and fetched a fresh bottle of whiskey from the shelf. I wrote his name on it with a marker, poured a shot in 2 glasses, dropped in a couple of ice cubes, and added some water. I had to concentrate to keep my hand from shaking. I see you're drinking whiskey now. I like that in a woman. My tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth. I took a swig. It burned less than before and rocketed warmth through my veins. We did not get to talk much before, I regret, he said. You are American, yes? Yes, I'm from the Chicago area, I said. A very interesting city. I've been there often. So what brings you here? I could ask you the same, Mr. Tambuki. The whiskey was doing its work quickly. Clever answer, he said. Very good. Perhaps we are just 2 people in search of something. Let us drink to that. Mr. Tambuki raised his glass and we toasted each other. I wanted to let him know I was more than a bar hostess. So I said, I'm going to business school in the fall. I'm here for a banking internship to get some experience in the international realm. It sounded good, too bad it wasn't happening. I thought there might be more to your story, he said. And which bank is it? The American Bank of Tokyo. And what do they have you doing? He took out a cigarette and held it expectingly. His question threw me off course, and I momentarily forgot my job. Magically, Berta passed her jeweled lighter to me. Mr. Tambuki curled his hand over mine to direct the flame. His fingers were warm, but not sweaty. He sat back, took a puff, and studied me. It took me a second to remember that he had just asked me something. Well, it's unclear, I said. It seems that my supervisor's been transferred to Dubai, and no one is available to take his place. He blew a perfect smoke ring away from me. Dubai, how unfortunate. What will you do now? I'm going to look for something else, I guess. I have connections. I might be able to help you. He took another deep drag from his cigarette and stubbed it out. But what do you want from this internship, as you call it? I'm supposed to be acquiring something that Wharton, that's the school I'm going to, calls cultural adaptability. I wasn't sure I should be telling Mr. Tambuki all this, but if he could help me, I thought he had a right to know the details.
Well, we got about a few seconds left.
Okay. Are you not acquiring cultural adaptability from this job? I don't think that's what they had in mind exactly. I believe they meant it in more of a business sense. Perhaps, but you should broaden your definition. Japan is a very complicated 3-dimensional puzzle for outsiders. If you view it from one side, you will miss the other faces of it, yes?
Yes. Well, thank you so much for being on Poet to Poet, Writer to Writer.